communion, the Lord's Supper. That's where we're going to go. Let's begin with this. Recognize this? This is a Rubik's Cube. Full disclosure, technically this is not a Rubik's Cube. This is a knockoff, made in China. Only cost me $2. Pretty good deal. But here's how this works with the Rubik's Cube. Once you do this, the goal is to get it back. The goal is for each side to only have one color. So the goal is clear. The how-to, that's difficult because there are over 43 quintillion possible combinations. Do you know how to solve this puzzle? I do. And before our time together is out, I am going to show you how to solve the Rubik's Cube in under 30 seconds. Not a great way to start the new year? All right, we'll get there. Here's what we're doing. Biblically, we are teaching through the New Testament book of James. We're calling it Live the Truth. We took a little break during December for Christmas. Well, we're going to go back to James. We're going to teach all the way through the book of James. And as we do that, kind of relaunching that today, I want to refresh our memories. The New Testament book of James, it begins with these words, James 1, verse 1, James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ. So we get right out of the gates, James, the book of James, is written by James. Shocker. So who is this James? What do we know about him? Well, James, he was the leader of the first century followers of Jesus that were living in Jerusalem. He was also the biological brother, half-brother of Jesus. See, James and Jesus shared the same biological mom, Mary. James's biological father was Joseph. Jesus' biological father, was God through the power of the Holy Spirit. You know, some of the books in the Bible are renowned for being historical. Some for being theological, some for being poetical, some for being philosophical. Not James. James is renowned for being practical. See, the book of James, it's less like a Walt Whitman sonnet, and it's more like a how-to book. In this passage we're going to look at today, James, he doesn't teach us how to solve the Rubik's Cube, but he does teach us how to overcome some of our bad habits. Sounds like a pretty good New Year's resolution. Well, the passage starts this way, verse 19 in chapter 1. He says, "My dear brothers and sisters." Now, let's not read right by that. That's actually quite important. I want us to notice here, right out of the gates, who is James talking to? Is he talking to everyone? Well, no, he's not. He's specific. He says, "My dear brothers and sisters." James is saying these things that we're going to hear the rest of the book of James to people who are already following Jesus. They have been saved. They have been forgiven. They are heaven bound. That's important. If you miss that, then you might start thinking that what James says in this passage and in the passages to come, these are the things that we need to do in order to be saved, in order to be loved by God. That is not true. Christianity starts with God's love for each and every one of us. We mess up. And then the good news is he still loves us. And he sent Jesus, and Jesus willingly sacrificed his life on the cross, conquering sin, conquering death through the resurrection. So to those who acknowledge, I got sin in my life. I need Jesus. I need what you did for my salvation. For those who do that, well, God saves us, and he also adopts us like children into his family. Verse 19 begins, "My dear brothers and sisters." This is written to people who are already members of his family. what James teaches here, it doesn't save us. It's showing members of the family of God how we can be more like Jesus. Do you understand the difference? Okay, I think we're ready to continue. Verse 19 goes on. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak. It's been said that the average person lives with 3 delusions. Delusion number 1, I'm a good driver. If you're living or if you're sitting next to anybody with that delusion, go ahead and give them the elbow of truth, right there. That's the delusion. Delusion number 2, I have a good sense of humor. Again, you can use that elbow if you want to. Delusion number 3 is this, I'm a good listener. A lot of people think they're good listeners, but studies actually show, well, not so much. We like to talk. We like to share. We like to reveal. I mean, just look at our most popular social media accounts. We have Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. Look at me. Here's what's going on with me. Listen to me. James says, be quick to listen, slow to speak. Over Christmas, I ran into a person that I hadn't seen for a long time. Imagine, a lot of you have probably had something like that happen over the holidays. And what happened, we met, it'd been a long time. She shared with me, and she shared with me about her family. And she shared with me about her job. And then she shared with me about her health. I now know more about this person's GI tract than any human being cares to know. In this conversation, there was no reciprocation, not even one question was asked back my way. And so I kind of wonder how that played out. Because I can only imagine, her going back to her house. You wouldn't believe who I ran into today. I ran into Mike Van Rees. Oh, well, how's he doing? She had no idea. She'd have to make something up. Be quick to listen, slow to speak. Say, but I'm a verbal processor. Be quick to listen, slow to speak. Most of us have a tendency to do the exact opposite of what James is saying here. Our tendency is to be quick to speak and slow to listen. The rabbis of old, they had a proverb. We talked about it a few weeks ago. It was this. They said, well, God has given us 2 ears and 1 mouth because we are designed to listen twice as much as we speak. Do you do that? Now, I find that a little bit convicting. Verse 19. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak. Okay, I hear you, James, but why? Why is that such a big deal? Why is that so important that it gets in the Bible? Why? Well, here's why that's so important. That's important because that's about relationships. In order to get to know another person, we need to be able to listen to that person carefully, intently, to actually know what it is that's going on underneath the surface. Sometimes we think that we can fool ourselves. We can fool ourselves into thinking that we are listening when we simply allow the other person to speak. We can think, if I'm quiet for a few moments, then I'll get my turn. That's not listening. When we're really listening, we're not just waiting for an opportunity to chime in. When we are really, truly listening, here's what we're doing. We are giving that other person the gift of our time and the gift of our attention. See, here's what listening does. Listening, there's a deeper value underneath it. Listening demonstrates you matter. That's what it shows. When we listen to another person, we're saying, you matter. You are important. I'm not just about me. I'm not just about my thoughts. I'm not just about my experiences. I'm not just about my stories. I care about you. Be quick to listen, slow to speak. It's in the Bible from James. So how are you doing with this one? You up for a little true-false quiz? Let's look at a few. And you don't have to tell anybody. You don't have to raise your hands. Just to do, a little self-inventory. Start with this one, true or false. My friends would say, I listen more than I speak. Is that true or false for you? Or this one. When people are angry with me, I am able to listen to their side without getting upset. Is that true or false for you? Or this one, I am able to reflect back and validate another person's feelings with empathy. Is that true or false? Or this one, I ask questions when listening to draw more out. Do you do that? Is that true or false for you? One more, I don't interrupt or listen for an opening so that I can talk. True or false? If you're really courageous, you can even ask a close friend or family member, am I quick to listen and slow to speak? You may be surprised at what you hear. Well, maybe you're at the point where you're like, I got it. I hear it. I understand what James is saying here. So that's great. And I don't want to be a chatterbox. And I don't want to be a conversation hog, and I don't want to be self-absorbed. How? How can I be quick to listen and slow to speak? How can I become a better listener? How can I not just focus on me? How can I focus on them? Give me the how-to. Rubik's Cube. Do you know how to solve this? Check this dude out. This guy, Kevin Hayes, he can solve the Rubik's Cube in 12 seconds under the water. That's a pretty amazing feat. Before our time is done, I am going to show you how to solve the Rubik's Cube in under 30 seconds. Well, James continues, verse 19 and 20. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Notice what James is doing here. He's making a distinction between human anger and righteous anger. He's saying there is a good and a righteous and a godly anger. There is also a bad and unrighteous anger. The psalmist tells us this. Psalm 103, verse 8. The Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love. Notice that doesn't say, well, God doesn't get angry. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say, well, hey, God, he has no anger. It doesn't say that. It says, God, our God, he is slow to anger. To get God angry, you got to push it. I mean, really push it. He's got a long fuse. But when he sees evil and darkness and injustice, he feels angry about it. God does get angry. He gets angry at sin. He gets angry at evil because they are contrary to who he is and how he designed this world to work. But I thought God is love. Don't we sing about that all the time? Don't we talk about it all the time? I mean, God is love, God is love, God is love. Yes, God is love, and love, it's not just hugs and kisses. Love protects. Love defends. Love fights for. Sometimes love necessitates anger. Sometimes when some of the things that we should experience anger, there are some things that should kind of rile us up. You know, like this. When you see someone who gets taken advantage of, that should stir up some anger. When you hear about or see someone who's been abused, we should feel angry. When someone is treated unfairly because of their social status or the color of their skin, we should feel angry. When someone makes a promise or a commitment and then they don't follow through with it, we should feel angry. But be careful, because not all anger is good and just and righteous. There are also things like this, right? I mean, how did that happen? Well, that is this. Verse 20. Human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Human anger is the result of not getting what we want. Human anger, it's not, well, I'm angry because someone else is getting taken advantage of. It's not, I'm angry because this person, is affecting them. No, human anger is about me. Human anger is when I'm not getting what I think I deserve to get. Biologically speaking, science has found some kind of cool things out about anger. And here's what's happening. When we get angry, we have our adrenaline gland in us, and it starts spitting out chemicals such as adrenaline and cortisol. And then because of that, our heart starts beating faster, our blood pressure rises, and if we don't turn things around, it will actually block activity in our prefrontal cortex, the part of our brains that is used for rational decision making. That's a big deal. Saying when we get angry, the part of our brain that is rational actually shuts down. That's a dangerous place to be. Marvel, the comic books, Marvel, they created a superhero who has an anger control problem. Right? I mean, he goes through a physical transformation when he gets angry, turns green. Who am I talking about? Yeah, the Hulk, right? The Incredible Hulk. And his tagline? His tagline is this. His tagline is, don't make me angry. You won't like me when I'm angry. Do you know anyone like that? Or maybe I should put it this way. Do your friends or your family know anybody like that? Because I'm going to guess that some of you struggle with this issue of anger. For some, it can take one thing, one word, one irritation, and it just sets you off. It's like a grenade with the pin pulled out, just one little bump and boom, explosion. If that's you, understand, think about the people who are around you. Because my guess is the people who are around you, they probably have to live a very guarded life. And they probably have to be so very careful, living in fear that something they may do or say will set you off. And they're probably hoping that you're listening right now, because anger hurts people. Well, here's the typical response to that. It's like, well, yeah, I get that. I agree with that. But when I'm angry, I'm justified. See, when I'm angry, I have a good reason to be angry. Something brought me that way, and my anger is justified. Okay, let's say that your anger is justified. I won't push back on that. I'll accept that. Even if your anger is justified, yelling is not. Even if your anger is justified, belittling or demeaning another person, disrespecting another person, that's not. Even if your anger is justified, well, losing control, that is not. Do you want to be filled with anger, or do you want to overcome it? Because my guess is most people here, we want to overcome that. We don't want anger to dominate us. So, does what James says here, does it help? Does it help with our anger issues? Here's what he says, verse 19. Be slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. So I hear that, and I think, okay, James, I agree with that. And I think, okay, yeah, James, I can affirm that. I don't want to be an angry person. Who does? I don't want to be a person with a short fuse. I agree with James, but here's my question. How? How do I do that? How do I overcome that? Rubik's Cube. Do you know how to solve this? Check this guy out. This guy, he is able to solve the Rubik's Cube with his feet in 31 seconds. Wow, right? That's quite a feat. You got that? Before our time is done, I'm going to show you how to solve the Rubik's Cube in under 30 seconds. Well, James, he continues, and he tells us this. He says, the passage concludes with verse 21. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. See, the Greek word that we translate here, moral filth, it's actually kind of an interesting word. It literally means wax in the ear. Gross, right? I mean, that's a little bit nasty, but it's also common. It's saying, what he's saying here is we need, if we're going to be able to listen, we need to get some wax out of our ears so that we can hear. He says this is true with other people, and James is saying it's also true with our relationship with God. There can be wax on our ears, things that get in the way so that we aren't really listening and we aren't really opening to the Word of God. Sometimes we don't hear God, not because He's not speaking, but because our ears are plugged up with other stuff. You know, we're busy, or we're not seeking Him, or we're not listening to Him. James is saying, well, get rid of the earwax. So once again, as I'm reading this passage in the Bible, my mind goes to, I agree with you, James. And I say, I am in favor of that, James. But here's the question that remains, well, how? I hear you, James, but how can I do that? James, give me some steps. James, give me some techniques. James, give me some tools. Give me some how-tos. Well, I think that we are ready for this. So I know how to solve the Rubik's Cube. And I made a commitment to you. I said I would show you how to solve the Rubik's Cube in under 30 seconds. So here we go. This is going to help. Problem solved, right? That is one way to solve the Rubik's Cube, and that's the only way I know how to solve the Rubik's Cube. You know, here's what I think. With this passage in James, this passage, what James is doing, it reminds me of that. See, James, he doesn't give us, techniques, and he doesn't give us tools, and he doesn't give us tips on how to become a better listener, or how to overcome our anger, or how to get rid of our moral filth. Some people will take this passage and they'll do that. They'll come up with a list, and they'll add some practical, personal thoughts, and they all amazingly happen to start with C. And, that's nice. But that's not James. That's not what James does in this passage. James, he really does show us how to. But if you want to know what James is saying for the how-to, you have to look at this passage a little bit closer. Okay, I think we'll see it this time. Verse 21. Listen for it, for the how-to. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. Did you hear it? And humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. And humbly accept the word planted in you. Well, what is that? What is that word? What word has that kind of power? Humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. Well, I'll tell you what that word is. Jesus. 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 How can I become a better listener? How can I conquer my anger? How can I get rid of moral filth? Well, James, he tells us how. And he doesn't give us tools. He doesn't give us techniques. He doesn't give us tips. James, he points us to Jesus. What James is doing in this passage is he's saying, this is how. This is how. When we understand this, when we get this, it changes us on the inside. I think that's why Jesus told us, do this and remember. It was the Passover, and Jesus had made arrangements to be in the upper room near the temple with his closest followers. And they were going through the Passover meal, which is a ritual that's really quite formulaic. And he does the same thing year after year after year after year. And as they were doing that, Jesus did something that surprised them. He took the bread, and instead of saying the phrase that usually came next, Jesus took the bread and he said, "This is my body." You're like, what? Well, what's that mean? What's that about? Well, here's what that means. When Jesus says, "This is my body," he's saying this represents Christmas. Right? This is God saying, I'm going to give up my power. I'm going to give up heaven. I'm going to give up my glory and my majesty. I'm going to come to this earth. I am going to be incarnated, fully human, fully divine. Jesus. He says, this is me. This is my body. And I want you to know why I came. I came because this world is broken. And we can see that. You don't have to look very far. It's all around us. And it's not just around us. When we're honest, it's also in us. And so what do we do about that? Because Jesus says, well, that sin, and what that does is it separates us from God. Creates a barrier in our relationship with God. And so Jesus, he says, I don't want that for you. So this is my body broken for you. He was talking about the cross. The cross was the very next day. Jesus knew that was coming. He willingly went to Jerusalem. He willingly gave up his life. He said, this is my body. I'm satisfying justice. I'm covering your sin. I got you taken care of. And then he took the juice. He said, this represents, my blood. He said, I know this is going to hurt. This is going to be painful for me. But you're worth it. That's God saying, I love you. I've not forgotten you. I care about you. I want to be in a tight relationship with you. Lord God Almighty, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, did this for us. Well, how do I become a better listener? How do I overcome my anger? How do I get rid of my moral filth and my self-absorption? Can I do that? Is there a tip? Is there a technique? Is there a tool? James, he says, no. Well, can I get that by trying really, really, really hard? James, he says to us, no. How do we get that? James says, we get that with this. When we understand who he is, and when we understand what it is that he has done, when that sinks in, it changes things. It changes my wants. It changes my desires. It changes my purpose. It changes me. So let's begin this new year together, remembering who he is, what he's done, and giving him our thanks.